So we are very fortunate to have His Grace Chaitanya Charan Prabhuji. So let's welcome Prabhuji by loudly chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra for him.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
And Prabhuji is going to give many talks, but the first talk that he is giving here today is on the topic: are parents responsible for changing their children's nature? Very interesting topic. So let us see what Prabhuji is going to enlighten on that topic to all of us. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Delighted to be here with all of you once again. It's always a joy to see, could say, a replica of India in New Zealand. So, let's begin with some prayers. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjalashalaakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namah Om Vishnupadaya Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyastu Vasidyananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Asadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Grateful to be here with all of you once again today. And so the topic which I'll speak today is, as I mentioned, are parents responsible? Sorry. Okay. What do I do over here? Need something here. Let's see. Am I audible without echo now? Yeah. So basically, I'm trying something. Let us see if it works. I'll be using the screen to draw certain things and to explain some things by illustrating if required. So basically, the topic is, are parents responsible for changing their children's nature? So I'll take this in three parts. First is, what is nature? I'll talk about what is nature. And second, I'll talk about is, how can nature be changed? Is it changeable? And then third will be, how to change it. So let's start with, without getting any complexity of the word nature, let's start with a fundamental question. So in this how part and the changeable part is where we'll be focusing more on parenting. But it is not a talk only about parenting. It's more a talk of understanding nature. So I'll ask all of you a question. Are people basically good or basically bad? How many of you think people are basically good? Okay. How many of you think people are basically bad? Only I? Okay. No, not I. Okay, let me soften the second question. How many of you think some people are basically bad? Yeah. We all would like to believe that people are basically good. But we have encountered people who are, as children, we've encountered bullies, we have encountered spiteful people. We encountered people who basically seem evil. So although we would like to believe that people are basically good, we can't deny the hard-eyed reality that some people seem to have something essential missing within them. That means normally most of us, when we do something bad, we feel bad about it. But there are some people who do something bad and feel some joy in doing it. So broadly, we can say that we consider nature, there are two distinct theories of human nature. Now again, I'm simplifying this subject. And we could say there is you have heard of these two words, right and left. What does it mean? Yes, I'm not talking about right and left hand. I won't insult your intelligence by asking about. So, so right and left is the political right and the political left. So, for example, often the right wing is associated with religion, say with Christianity. So Christians have this idea. Now again, Christianity is a very broad religion. There are a very wide variety of Christians also. But broadly, Christian idea is that people are innately bad. Now why? Because they say Adam committed the original sin when he rebelled against God. And from that point, sin is transmitted like a genetic defect through all of humanity. So just by our birth itself, we are all sinful. So we are innately bad. You are squinting. You're telling me my handwriting is innately bad. Okay. So now the left is basically right is, you can say, Christians. Now again, I don't want to essentialize Christians. There are a wide variety of Christians. The left is, we can say broadly, communists. There are Marxists. There are socialists. All of them. Now what Christians hold is that people are innately bad, and we need culture and law to make people good. So if there were no culture in the human society, and culture means do this, don't do this, and culture, we say, it's a little more gentle, law is a little more firm, and culture and law are needed to make people good. Without that, people will all act in evil ways. Now on the left side, the communists have the opposite idea, that people are innately good, and they say, so it is social conditions that make them bad. So if you see, many movies have this kind of idea. Say there is some big terrorist who has killed a lot of people. The terrorist is a terrible person, but the movies will try to humanize him. Now this happened to his family, and this happened to him, and because of this person became like that. So their idea is that society makes people bad. People are basically like a clean slate, or when they are born, but so based on social conditions, people are exploited, people are discriminated against, and that's what makes them bad. So they say what we need is not individual discipline, but social reform. The right say that if you want to if you want to make some people good, what do we need to do? We need to individually discipline people. So culture and law are meant to discipline people. But the left says we need social conditions to be changed. That means society should accommodate different people who are different and facilitate them to grow. Now, like if I depicted as a pendulum, like in everything, in both sides, there is some truth to it. We can say that there is some kind of an animal, some kind of a devil within everyone. And the different groups of people sometimes go on strike. In India, especially, say, the railway may go on strike, the taxi drivers may go on strike. And if the police go on strike, all the criminals will strike. Isn't it? Not just criminals, even ordinary people will strike. So there is something dark within us which can come out. So we do need some level of discipline. But if people were innately bad, then why is everyone not equally innately bad? There are degrees. Some people are good, some people are not so good. And if you consider the opposite side, the left ideology is that actually people are good. Society makes them bad. But if that were the case, if social conditions were alone determining people, then some of the most inspiring human stories are stories of people who rose from adversities. They were born in poverty, maybe they had neglectful or abusive parents, and they were bullied in school, but somehow they managed to study, they managed to do well, and they become responsible, successful citizens, successful human beings now. So stories are inspiring. So we humans have the capacity to rise above adversity, to face difficult situations and still find a way to maintain our honor, to not let bad situations make us bad. So the idea is that both of these have some truth to it. Now the Bhagavad Gita's understanding is that when we talk about innateness, there is not one level of innateness, but two levels of innateness. There is the soul, then around the soul there is the mind, and around the mind is the body. Now at the level of the soul, everyone is good, because the soul is a part of God. Mamaivamsho jivaloke. Every living being is a part of God. So every soul is good. Now, as far as, sorry, this is the soul is here. Now, as far as the mind is concerned, this depends. Depends on purva samskaras, on past life's impressions. So when we say past life impressions, what do we mean by that? That different people have different impressions from their previous lives, and based on those impressions, this is the Gita's understanding that on the mind there could be positive or negative impressions. There are two levels of innateness. Now, in the mind, there could be positive or negative impressions based on the previous impressions from a person's previous lives, previous activities. So, when we say there is some people are of a godly nature or an ungodly nature, Krishna talks about Daivi and Asuri Sampada in the 16th chapter of the Gita. So, even a demon is at the level of the soul fully pure. But at the level of the mind, they have a lot of dark conditionings. So everybody at their core is godly. Like, one person has hurt another person very much, and that person's friend goes and tells the person who has been hurt, no, he's actually a good person at the heart. And the person who's hurt says, yeah, I am worried about what is around the heart. So the idea is that sometimes the conditionings are very strong. So now from this perspective, are people innately good or innately bad? Well, it depends. Yes, if you consider innateness at the level of Atma, yes, everybody is good. Innateness at the level of the body, at the level of the mind, see, Krishna uses the word in the 16th chapter, Abhijatasya Bharata. He talks about for the Daivi Prakriti and the Asuri Prakriti, he says, Abhijatasya, that everybody is born. And some people are born with godly qualities, some people are born with ungodly qualities. Now, of course, you can say this is a broad extreme. Very few people are fully godly or fully ungodly. I prefer the word ungodly because demoniac sounds too harsh a word. So, in our early days of practicing Krishna Bhakti, we had a skit about how not to share Krishna Bhakti, how to not to share Bhagavad Gita. So, somebody is going to distribute Bhagavad Gita, and they tell the person, read the 16th chapter. In that 16th chapter, you'll find yourself. So the 16th chapter is Asuri Pravritti. So basically, you're telling people that you are demoniac. It's a terrible thing to do. Everybody has some level of some godly qualities, some ungodly qualities. But the thing is that the key point here is that these impressions are not permanent. They are changeable, and that is the journey of purification. That a conditioned soul, as I said, conditioned soul means not that the conditioned soul is not necessarily a ungodly soul completely. There is maybe a lot of dark conditioning is there, but as we become purified, the dark conditioning keeps decreasing. And when we become purified, the dark conditioning almost completely goes away. And that is how the purification manifests completely. Now, another way to understand this is, we can consider 3 examples. The soul at its core is very pure. But we could say, in the Daivi Prakriti, the mind is like a conductor for the soul. And the divinity of the soul comes out very nicely. But in the Asuri Pravritti, in the ungodly nature, the mind is basically like an insulator. Nothing comes out. The godliness is so buried deep within. It's almost inaccessible. So human nature is a complex thing because each human being as an individual has a complex blend of distinct conditionings. So some godly, some ungodly. We all have those individual conditionings. Most of us are like in the semiconductors. There are some of the godly nature from the soul comes out, some of the godliness of the soul comes out, and much of the impure conditionings of the mind also surface. So with this broad understanding of human nature, what the Bhagavad Gita states is that each of us needs to work to purify ourselves. So now with this understanding, let's go back to what we were discussing earlier. Now what the left says is the responsibility is on society. The right says the responsibility is on the individual. Now, actually, if we consider from this perspective, parents are a part of the society. Of course, parents are a very special part of the society in the sense that parents have far greater influence on the children. Then as they grow up, they will be exposed to society. Then they'll be influenced by society, social culture, by specifically their peers, their social circle specifically. So we could say that the Bhagavad Gita talks about dharma at two levels. Dharma, when Krishna talks about, Arjuna asks Krishna, what is my dharma? Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha chetaha. So this inquiry is about dharma at an individual level. That means, thank you. Actually, one time the same thing happened and the projector was not visible to me. So it was a little ahead. So I was writing and everybody's looking blank. It's almost like they were watching a foreign language movie, without subtitles. So then I asked what happened. It was almost 10 minutes. I said, we are not able to see what you're writing. He says, why didn't you tell me? He says, we thought we should be humble.
So in short, you're telling me that I'm not humble.
Yeah, I'm thanking you for not being humble. Okay, what happened now? Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, this is okay. So, dharma is, when Arjuna is asking about dharma, what is the right thing to do? So he is asking at an individual level. So dharma is each individual has to take the responsibility to do the right thing. But at the same time in Krishna, so this is, you could say in 2.7 in the Gita. But when Krishna uses the word dharma samsthapanarthaya, sambhavami yuga yuga, I come to establish dharma. What is he referring to? He's referring to dharma at a social level. He's talking about how the society needs to be administered by a virtuous leader. The social culture should be conducive to encourage people to do the right thing. So this, in 4.8, Krishna is talking about dharma at a social level. So in one sense, it's a cooperative effort. It is not just the individual who alone can do the right thing. Of course, individuals have to take the responsibility to do the right thing, but society also has to contribute to that. So the Bhagavad Gita's understanding is that, yes, there are rules and culture, both are important. But just rules and culture and law alone is not enough. We also need a society that is conducive for spiritual growth. So with this broad understanding, so if we consider that, let's come to specifically parenting. Now, with respect to parenting, it's like we said all the children, every soul has certain impressions in the mind from the previous life. And in one sense, the responsibility of parents is to get the best nature of the children to manifest, the godly side to manifest. Godly side doesn't necessarily mean they all have to necessarily become devotees, but just they're responsible, they are courteous, they are well behaved, they are committed. So even from an ordinary perspective, there are certain virtues which make a person a good person. So that is broadly the responsibility of parents, to try to manifest the better side, the higher side of the children's nature. So again, with respect to parenting, we could say that there are two broad ways of looking at it now. Consider parenting is that we could call it broadly the Eastern way and the Western way. Again, this is generalizing because East and West also have many nuances. But again, broadly speaking. So here, once there was a court case in India, the mother and the father both were in court. Why? They said, the father said, I want my son to become an engineer. And the mother said, I want my son to become a doctor. He says, the judge said, why have you come to me for this? Ask your son. No, we can't ask him. Why not? He's not yet born. So, the idea here is that in the Eastern way of parenting, it's almost like parents think that it is their responsibility to shape the children completely. So each of us, when we do some actions, there are certain metaphors which we may consciously have in our mind, or we may not know about it. But the common metaphor used in the East for parenting is like children are like clay. And parents are meant to shape the children. Now clay in itself is shapeless. And clay can be shaped into a pot, it can be chopped into a plate, it can be shaped into a vase, whatever we want. So that is the idea. I want my child to become a doctor, I want to become a child to become an engineer. Now, if we consider from the Bhagavad Gita's philosophy, this is not exactly true. Children come with their previous impressions. And they are not like shapeless clay. Their subtle body already has a particular shape. And so this kind of parenting becomes, in one sense, too restrictive. Because it's like the parents are trying to reshape the children according to their image. Now, on the other hand, the West, I was staying in America at a American devotee's house, and they had a daughter who was just finishing 12th. So they asked me, so, what is she planning to do for 12th? So the Prabhu looked at his wife, he says, I don't think we have asked her till now, have we? So I was thinking at that time, I didn't tell it to them, but it's like, I don't think I have asked. This is never a question which will come in Indian family. Probably from the 7th, 8th standard itself. What are you going to go after 12th? This or this or this or that. It's almost like, it's your life. What you want to do, you do. And okay, you just inform us what you want to do. It's like that. I have not asked you what you want to do. So this, often the idea over here is like, to some extent there is truth in it. But here the idea is, it's like a seed. That children are like seeds. And now, if I have got a mango seed, no matter what I do, I cannot get an orange from it. So, children have their nature and they are going to develop their nature. This does not mean that, I'm not saying that Western parenting is neglectful. It is just a different conception. If you see from one perspective, in the West, there's a lot of care for children. Children, and they're small children, you cannot just carry a child on your lap in the car. You have to have a seat in the behind. You cannot leave children at home all alone. There's a lot of care. But that care is also coupled with a lot of emphasis on individual autonomy. Okay, the children is their life, let them do what they want. Now the problem with this is that, okay, even if we say, I'll talk about how this is true and how this is not true. But this kind of parenting tends to become very permissive. Okay, it's, you are who you are, you just develop it according to. So parents often don't set any boundaries and just let their children go the way they want. So so the clay metaphor puts too much limitation. The seed metaphor, their idea is that, okay, we have to protect the children in the sense that When they are gardening, we have to have a proper fence, you have to provide proper water and nutrients. But beyond that, the seed will grow on its own way. So like that, at a physical level, there's a lot of protection given to children. But beyond that, they are left to their own needs, more or less. So now, if we consider, I'll come to the middle of this a little later, but when I talked about conditionings earlier, I talked about something like Daivi and Asuri, the dark and the bright conditionings. But the conditionings or the impressions that we carry from the past are not that simple. If we say, let me put another way over here. If this is the soul, this is the body, and this is the mind. Let me write the mind over here outside. So now if you want to talk about the conditionings, broadly the Gita says the conditionings have two distinct categories to it. One, we can call it as vritti, and the other is vasana. So vritti, for example, is Brahman, Kshatriya, the four varnas. Now vasana is kama, krodha, lust, anger, greed, like that. So now these two are distinct kinds of conditionings. And what Krishna says, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, in 339, he is talking about this vasana, and he says this has to be regulated. The greed, the anger, the selfishness, all this needs to be regulated. So this is to be regulated. And this vritti, he talks about this in 334, 35. He says this has to be channeled. This is not to be regulated. This is where Krishna uses, there's a verse which Krishna says, Nigraha kim karishyasi. What can repression accomplish? So what can repression accomplish means, Krishna is telling Arjuna that you are a Kshatriya. You may think that, I don't want to fight a war, I'll just renounce and live like a Brahmana. He says, you can't do that. You have a particular swabhava, and you will act according to that swabhava. So what is happening over now in terms of this Vritti Vasana model? Let's see, when small children are growing up, at that time, one of the most important words that a child needs to hear is no. Now why? Because in one sense, if a child is playing and the child loses, the child throws a temper tantrum at that. Now, if the child is playing with the parents may tolerate it. But if the child starts playing with other children and the child starts throwing a temper tantrum at that time, then the other kids will say, I don't want to play with you. See, in one sense, the parents are the greatest champion of the children. And if the children behave in a way that even the parents don't like them, then it's very unlikely that the rest of the world will like those children. And if the children are disliked, then they will become resentful, they will become bitter, and they will not grow up properly. So when saying no doesn't mean depriving the children of everything. It just means saying no means setting boundaries. It is very important. So the vasanas need to be regulated. Now in this case, we don't talk about children having vasanas, but we could say children are self-centered, selfish. I want all the toys. Now you share your toys with others. If there are sweets, you don't eat all the sweets. Give to your siblings, give to your friends. So that kind of saying no and setting boundaries for the purpose of regulation is essential. So this, if it is not done, then the children grow up to be malformed. They don't grow up to be very well integrated individuals. So saying no not for deprivation, but for setting boundaries. That's the difference between the two. When we say no, one could be we just deprive the children. There's deprivation. You won't get this, you won't get that, you won't get that. That is not the purpose. But it is for the sake of boundaries. This is acceptable behavior. This is not acceptable behavior. And here when you say acceptable and unacceptable behavior, it is basically based on the vasanas. Even in children, there is greed. If a child loses a game, the parents have to train them. You have to be a graceful loser. No, congratulate the winner. Just smile, be good. You may not feel good, but act in a cultural way. These things are important. And if these are not there, then if there are no boundaries, Then when the children grow up, then when there are no parents to parents are not set boundaries for them, when they grow up, they will grow with no conception of boundaries. And that is why in America, for example, many of you may have heard of the school shootings. Now, it's a complex and tragic social phenomena. The laws are also quite messed up. Now, one needs to be 21 to buy drugs or to buy alcohol. But by 18, one can buy practically a machine gun. So it's a very distorted set of laws. But still, the point is, many of these kids who just go out and kill in schools, no, they are not villains. They are not evil people. But they actually often grow up in dysfunctional families. That's one of the common determinants of this particular thing. So no boundaries can lead to a lot of danger. So we could say if we go back here to the Eastern model of parenting, where the focus is on restriction, that addresses the vasanas very well. But in that process, you see, all the impressions from the past that we get are not all bad. There are vritti also. Vritti means there are innate interests that we have. So Arjuna as a Kshatriya would naturally be interested in Kshatriya things. Now the point of this fourfold division is not that we put everyone in a nice neat box. Oh, you are Brahmana pravritti, you are Kshatriya pravritti. No, it is just that we try to understand people's innate interests and then help them develop those interests. So in the West, in the name of individuality, now the terms vritti or the chaturvarna, all those terms will not be there. But the idea is, let the child develop his own individuality, his or her own individuality. And that is good. But individuality in terms of vritti is good. Individuality in terms of vasana is not good. Somebody is just selfish and egoistic. They say, that's my personality. Well, that's not your personality. That's not your prakriti, that's your vikruti. Isn't it? That has to be reformed. So when we talk about individual expression, individuality should be developed, no doubt. But individual development means what? Vritti should be developed. Not that the vasana should be developed. If the vasana is developed, then that is not actually healthy for anyone. So as parents, what is required is that there is this blend. There is some amount of disciplining that, okay, the parents teach the children, do this, don't do this. But parenting also involves certain level of learning. Learning means, what is my child like? What are my child's interests? What does the child like to do? What is the child happy doing? So observing the child to learn. So we could say, in one sense, if you want to have here a balanced metaphor, is something like driving. Now in driving, first the parent drives and let the child observe. But eventually the child drives and the parent observes. Eventually the child will drive even without the parent's observation. So in one sense, in the driving metaphor, the onus of agency, it is initially a lot with the parents, and gradually it shifts more and more to the children. Or in this case, the trainer and the trainee. See, the trainer is driving, and the trainee is just going along. But eventually the trainee is driving, the trainer is just going along. So basically, if in childhood the parents discipline the children so that their vasanas are reasonably regulated, then they can themselves, both the children as well as the parents, can understand their vritti. And once the vritti is understood, vritti means their innate interests, their innate talents. Once they are understood, then those can be developed. Then their individuality can be given greater scope to develop in a way that is healthy. So now, in general, if you talk about these two things, the vritti and the vasana. In this, again, I'll emphasize the vritti is not just, okay, this Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, because today's profession, how exactly are we going to correlate? This is a Brahman as a professor. Okay, but most professors have to spend a lot of time nowadays getting sponsorship for grants and writing grant proposals and doing that, that is not really Brahminical work. That is quite often Vaishya work. Not disrespecting professors over it, just analysis. So today's professions are very difficult to neatly classify into this varna or that varna or that varna. If somebody is a doctor, okay, what is that? That's a Brahmana. Doctor becomes very successful and they start their own hospital. And then the doctor is not doing that much consultation, actual medical consultation, doctor is doing supervision. So was that the doctor, after a doctor became successful, from a Brahmana, the doctor became a Kshatriya or a Vaishya? Well, it's not that simple. So now I'm not saying that the Varna system is not valid. There are ways of understanding it and applying in today's world. But the point is that when we want to understand nature, it is not that understanding nature is not about putting labels on people. It is about understanding the interests. So, okay, this is what my child is interested in. This is what my child is interested in. And then gradually those interests can be appropriately developed. So with this broadly in mind now, so the first topic was that what is nature? Second is the nature changeable? Well, the vrittis, the Bhagavad Gita says, are not very changeable. But the vasanas are not unchangeable, they are necessary to change. Now everybody needs to learn discipline, at least at some level. Even people who are materially successful, if somebody is a sports player, they have a lot of discipline. They will regulate their diet, they will have a very diligent workout. They are very disciplined in their way. So they regulate their vasanas at least at that level. So now the last part will be that I'll talk about how much can parents play a role in this. We talked about, is it the individual, is it the society? So now if we consider at the center is the individual. Individual is the person over here. Around him is the other parents. Around the parents are you could say the broad community. And then beyond the community is the society. Now, if you see at the individual, the children grow up, they are initially most influenced by their parents. But then they start in the community, they start meeting with other kids. They start getting exposed to that, influenced by that. And then as they go beyond the kids, they start being exposed to the mainstream culture. They start seeing society, how everybody is living. So in one sense, outside the individual, the parents have one major influencer. And the primary influence is in their early childhood. As they grow older, the influence starts becoming relatively lesser because the kids are more exposed to the world. And we cannot expect our kids to live in a bubble, unaffected by the world. They are going to be exposed to the world in some ways. So if we understand this now, what can the parents do with respect to the helping the children? Can the nature be changed? Yes, it can be. In terms of the vritti can be developed, the vasana can be disciplined, can be curbed. So generally when we talk about parenting, we talk about how it is the parents' responsibility to give spirituality to the children. That's what we talk about in the devotee circle, right? To make the children Krishna conscious. And that's important. However, the principle here is that when we are helping our children, we help our children in material ways and spiritual ways, in every way possible practically. So when we talk about, let's talk about here something. So here there is Krishna, here there is parent, and here there is child. So say this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. 1 means as a parent, this is our relationship with Krishna. We are practicing bhakti. And 2 is our relationship with our children. And 3 is their relationship with Krishna. Now when we practice bhakti, we start experiencing its purity, its transformative potency. Now we also want that our children should practice bhakti. And that's good. To try to give them the opportunity to practice bhakti, to encourage them, to inspire them, that is very good. At the same time, each soul is an individual. And in every relationship, there is something that we do for the other person, that is, you can say, our contribution to the relationship, and what they do for us or what we expect them to do for us. And when both of them are there, then there is reciprocation. The parent is here, child is here, so we have something like our contribution to the relationship and then our expectation from the relationship. This is what I am doing for you and this is what I want you to do. So if you keep these 2 points in mind, then what happens many times is that when we encourage our children to practice bhakti, when they are small, then it's just natural. Now the parents go to the temple, the kids go to the temple, parents see the children, children see the parents bowing down, the children also bow down. The children, parents encourage the children to memorize some verses, sing some songs, learn some instruments. And when the kids are primarily in this world, generally kids who are at least reasonably disciplined, reasonably cultured, they want to please their parents. And anything that pleases their parents, they will want to do it more. So if practicing bhakti pleases the parents will do that. Sorry, children will do that. And that is nice. But as they start growing older, they start coming to teenage, and then they go beyond the teenage. So now, at that time, they will start going through a turbulent phase. And that's when the rebellion will start coming in. Now, I'll explain a little why rebellion comes in, but let's focus on this point right now. That if we put too much pressure on them for 3, now do this, don't do this, then that will create a strain in 2. You tell me do this, don't do this, do this, do this. And when there is a strain in 2, then that will create a strain in 1 also. When say our relationship with the children is tense, then if you sit down to chant Hare Krishna, will not be really focused very well. So over a period of time, we need to let the children develop their 3 at their pace. And that does not mean completely letting them do whatever they want, but it's their inspiration, it's their individual choice. Sometimes in trying to force them to develop their relationship with Krishna, we end up spoiling our relationship with them. And if we spoil our relationship with them, then we feel disappointed. We feel, Krishna, I did so much bhakti. Why is my child not becoming a devotee? We start sometimes becoming angry with Krishna also. There was one there was one Gurukul boy, first generation ISKCON devotee child. I was talking, very intelligent boy. He is practicing bhakti in all way now. He said that throughout my childhood, I had to live with my parents' constant disappointment that I was not the reincarnation of Prahlad Maharaj. So in general, what can parents do for their children? Yes, we can encourage them to memorize verses, do kirtans, sing songs, participate in dramas. But the most important thing that parents can give to their children here is happy memories of Krishna Bhakti. The rules are not that important. How many rounds they chant, what time they wake up, how often they come to temple. Okay, these are important. But the most important thing is that they should have happy memories of Krishna consciousness. So when they go into teen, when they go into adulthood, if they look back at their childhood and they also think about Krishna, they think, I have to sit down and chant that mantra. That's their first thought. Then that will not inspire them to practice Krishna. What if they remember, at Krishna Janmashtami, I was playing a drama and I was dressed as Krishna and then I played that role and everybody clapped. It was so nice. They have happy memories of Krishna Bhakti. Those happy memories will draw them eventually toward Krishna. They will draw them eventually. And so that is the most important thing that as parents we can give to our children. Rules definitely are required, as I said, for regulating the vasanas. But eventually, we can't pressure, nobody can pressure anyone to practice Krishna Bhakti. It's a matter of the heart. So now, having said this, I'll make 2 more points and then we can have some questions. So now what happens in teenage? Teenage is a very complicated phase. And it is complicated because it is not just the children are being difficult, they are in difficulty. See, what happens is, if we consider in terms of, it's a identity crisis. What do I mean by an identity crisis? That when that person is a child, their identity is, I am the son of so and so, or son or daughter of so and so. That is their identity, and that is fine. When they will become adults, they will have their identity that I am I have this job, I have this degree, or whatever. They will have their own identity. Okay. Now, but in teenage, I put it over here as a middle of the pendulum as a balance, but actually it's no man's land. It is neither here. In teenage, they are too old to be satisfied with the identity that I am the son or daughter of so and so. And they are too young to have made their own identity in the world. And that is why at that time they have a crisis. Who am I really? And this is where at this time they're extremely vulnerable to peer pressure. So generally what they want is that I want to be accepted in my social circle. I want other kids to think that I'm cool. Sometimes in wanting to be cool, we end up becoming a fool. But unfortunately, that's a need. None of us can live, even as adults, if we are living in a place where nobody likes us, nobody wants to talk with us, we are all left alone. Even as adults, we'll find it difficult. And as teenage, they're just entering into their young adulthood. They find it extremely difficult. So when the children seem to be rebelling against their parents, it's not so much a rebellion against the parents as a search for their own identity. And often when they're searching for their identity, they want to build their identity separate from their parents. And sometimes that's why they go against what their parents tell them. But the point is, they're not going against their parents primarily, they're simply searching for their identity. And eventually, once they find their own identity, they get a job, they get a degree, they start getting a respectable position in society, they will settle down. But this is a very difficult phase for them. And in this phase, because their social circle, where they want a sense of belonging and acceptability, is their friend circle. And in that friend circle, maybe as children, they are relatively protected. But when they go into college, how much can the parents protect them at that? It's difficult. So then they may start feeling that my bhakti, it is such a, I can't eat this, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't hang out with everyone. It seems to make me like an alien in this world. And yet I have to live in this world, I have to succeed in this world. So it becomes a very difficult phase for them. And that is where, as parents, it's important that we don't put too much of a black and white understanding. See, generally, if you consider education, if you want to educate people in colors, if I want to educate our children in colors, so we'll start with, this is black, this is white. But most of reality doesn't exist as black and white. Most of reality exists as shades of gray, isn't it? So what do we mean by black and white in our situation? See, white is they are devotees and they are non-devotees. So this is how we differentiate initially. But our own philosophy says that it's not that simple. It's not that because somebody is not a devotee, that means they're all non-devotees and all non-devotees are same. To think that all non-devotees are same is actually Mayavad. Because everybody is an individual. And people, we could say, when we think of shades of grey, here there are three modes of material nature. There is ignorance, tamas, there is rajas, and there is sattva. So we could say broadly, sattva is pro-devotional, rajas is non-devotional, and tamas is anti-devotional. So when kids want to have friends, if the only criteria is, oh, be friends with devotees, don't mix with anybody else, and say, well, there are so few devotees in the world, who am I going to mix with? If I go to college, there are no devotees, what do I do at that time? Isn't it? So if that Vivek Buddhi is awakened in such a way that, see, in general, any thoughtful person can appreciate the value of goodness. Goodness is different from Sattva-guna, is different from Rajoguna. And we may say, oh, who is the Sattva-guna today? People eat meat, people drink, people smoke. Well, almost everybody does that. Well, okay, that one particular behavior may be in Tamoguna. But just as that people are not defined by one behavior. Can we say, okay, if we say eating meat makes a person tamasic, can we say that all the people who don't eat meat are in Sattva-guna then? No. Just as vegetarians, all vegetarians are quite different. Similarly, non-vegetarian people are also quite different. Some people may not be eating meat, but they may be very charitable. They may actually be very polite and sensitive in their behavior. They may be very environmental conscious also. So people are a complex blend. So if you consider college, not everybody in college is out there to enjoy and drink and do drugs. There are students who are serious. They may not be devotees, but they're there really for studying. They're interested in the subject. So those are, we could say, broadly Sattva-guna. And then there are kids who are in Rajoguna. They're not really interested in the study of the subjects, but they still want to be at the top. They want to succeed. They want to make it big. They want to be successful in sports, successful extracurricular activities. And they are also working hard in their own way. They may not be interested in academics per se, but they are not lazy or indisciplined. And then there are tamasic people, they're definitely there. They are there in one sense, they want to have fun, but in having fun, they are creating misery for themselves in the future, and they're creating misery for others. So there's a wide variety of people over there. So why am I talking about this is, I said here that there is peer pressure and there is the desire, the need to be accepted, to belong, to be seen as cool in one social circle. So now, if we have educated children with the intelligence, then they will, if at all they want to be cool, they will seek belonging in this circle, or at the most in this circle. That means those who are in Sattva or Raja, they won't seek belonging in this circle. So this is the best. This is also okay. Non-devotional means there's people are no higher interest. They are focused on their work. They're hardworking. They're diligent. So it is when they start belonging in the circle where people are just engaged in destructive behavior. That is extremely dangerous. But if we understand that, so going back to the vritti and the vasana, in that frame, you can say, in Sattva Guna, if I put it this way, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. Now, what happens in Sattva? The vritti is developed, the vasana is curbed highly, that a person really understands. Now, Sattva Guna doesn't mean everybody is a Brahmana, not necessarily. So, even a Vaishya, if that Vaishya is related to Sattva Guna, then that Vaishya will be earning a lot of money. They'll understand, this is my interest, I have that ability to earn money, but they will also be charitable. They'll also be thoughtful. They'll not necessarily exploit others in earning money. They'll be considerate. So the vasana goes down. Vritti is become well developed. In some ways, we can say in Rajoguna, the vritti and the vasana both go up. That means somebody is a Kshatriya, they work as a Kshatriya, but they are not really simply being a leader for doing good to society. They are being a leader because they want power. They want fame. And if there's some good is done to others, yeah, that's also good. It's like it's secondary. So such people may also be very talented. They may be very dedicated. But it's not that their dedication, that like some people, they may be very hard working when they come to their work. But after that, they're completely unregulated in other aspects of their lives. So their vritti is there, strong, but the vasana is also strong. But in Tamoguna, what happens is, the vasana becomes so strong that the vritti is almost lost. That the person, this is what we may call as people who have wasted talents. This person has talent, but that person gets somebody may be very good at music, very good at sports, but then that person starts taking drugs, that person starts drinking, and the person just can't develop their talents. So, or some sports players are infamous to be short-tempered. They just blow up in sports and they're fined and then they are expelled and then they can't play. So they may have vritti, but the vritti is lost. So ideally, we would like that when our kids want to grow up, yes, spirituality is important, but spirituality is not the only thing that is important. At their vritti, if they can associate people in those who are in sattva guna broadly, and then their vritti can be developed, and even from the social circle perspective, their vasana will go down, and that's how they can grow up wonderfully. So as parents, we need to overall help, we try to help them develop their vritti and check their vasana, and we try to help push them or prompt them to choose association and acceptance in a social circle that will encourage them to develop their vritti, and that will encourage them to also discipline their vasana. And one last point I'll make over here, that now our Krishna consciousness, what it can do. Sometimes if you have a very narrow understanding of Krishna consciousness, it's a very like a black and white understanding. If we have of Krishna consciousness, we think my child should be like this, and my child is not becoming like this, then I'm a failure as a parent. No, our child is an individual, and as an individual, that child has an individual nature. That child also has an individual relationship with Krishna. So in the parent-child relationship, I talked about there are two things. There is the contribution and there is the expectation. So now these are natural in every relationship. This is actually what makes it reciprocal. When you talk about reciprocation, there can be give and take which is based mechanically, but there can be give and take which is also based on affection. Now, dadati pratigrahanati. We give some gifts, others give us some gift back. That reciprocation is there. So basically, if we are Krishna conscious, if we ourselves are, if our own vasanas have gone down, if our own pride has gone down, then we will not force our vision on our children. That does not mean let them go and do whatever they want, but just means that there can be a greater communication between the parents and the children. Generally, as when kids become teenagers, parents often say that my kid just doesn't listen to me. But if you ask the teenagers, I've talked with them, teenagers, he says, what I speak, my parents don't understand only. So, if they feel that way, then there's no communication. So actually, our kids are living a very almost like a different universe from which we grew in. The world has changed drastically in the last 20 years. So, if we can understand, and then they actually need help. But when that help is offered in a very instructive, domineering way, then they get turned off from it. But that's what Chaitanya Charan says is, Prapte tu shodashe varshe putram mitravad acharet. He says, when the child becomes older, treat the child like a friend. He says, Pancha varshani lalayet, dasha varshani tadayet. At first, just shower the child with affection, then discipline the child, and then treat the child like a friend. What does that mean? That the friend, we don't just impose our will on the friend. It means we try to understand the friend. We may still give inputs, and especially the parental relationship, we often need to give inputs. But when there is this principle, if we are practicing bhakti, that means that it is rather than simply seeing our children, are you obeying me or not obeying me? We say, okay, what is this child as an individual? This child is not just my child, this is Krishna's child. So it is, I may have some plan for this child, but Krishna has a bigger plan for this child. And this child has a relationship with Krishna. So how best can I do my responsibilities? So when there is detachment, when a certain level of detachment comes in, detachment doesn't make us apathetic or irresponsible. Detachment here basically means we can come to a healthy relationship. So this one last pendulum, I conclude with this. See, in Rajoguna, we overestimate our capacity to control. We think, I tell you this and you must do this. We expect that everybody should obey us. In Tamas, we underestimate our capacity. We say, whatever I say, nobody listens to me only. So why should I even say anything at all? It becomes like that. But in Sattva, we can actually realistically estimate. We can estimate accurately. This is okay, in this particular relationship, this is the level of influence I have. This is the capacity I have. And we understand our capacity, we understanding our level of influence, and then we act accordingly. When we talk about service attitude, now service attitude, we must say, what does this mean? It means that if we hear in Shastra that we should do certain things, we do those things. If senior devotees tell us to do something, we do those things. That is all true. But service attitude can also mean one very important thing. It means that if we are sevaks, if we are servants, then that means a servant doesn't have unlimited control. Okay, I have to clean this room, but I have the resources, I have the instruments, I have the authority, I'll clean this room. So service attitude means to accept our limitations and then act fully within those limitations. Not that because I am limited, so why should I do anything? No, we accept our limitations and we act fully within those limitations. So if this is the essence, we could say it in a practical sense. In one sense, service attitude means chant the holy names, we worship Krishna, that's true. But in the practical functioning in the world, service attitude means, in this situation, this is my limitation. And so even if as parents we may have two children, one child may be a little more compliant, the other child may be a little more independent. We cannot treat both children equally. So then we understand, okay, in this particular relationship or in this relationship at this time, this is my limitation. If I speak like this, if I impose this too much, this is going to harm this relationship. But within this limitation, what can I do? So we could say that as parents of small children, the limitations on are relatively less. We have a lot of control over our children, and it's important to train them at that. But as we grow up, our control starts decreasing, and we need to accept that. That is where when Krishna says about detachment. Detachment doesn't mean irresponsibility. Detachment doesn't mean not caring for others. Detachment means being ready to let go of our control on others. So that way, actually, this understanding of detachment will strengthen our relationship. It will not weaken our relationship. So this is how our Krishna consciousness can actually help us become better parents. So detachment, it doesn't mean irresponsibility or hard-heartedness. This is not what it means. Not at all. What detachment means is the readiness to let go of our controlling capacity. Initially, we have a lot of control. Later on, we will not have that much control. So if we have this understanding of detachment, then we will be able to take care of our children much better in terms that actually help them. Sometimes we say, this is good for you, okay, but they just not ready to accept this is good for them. And then we make it like 1-0, then what happens is the relationship itself closes down. But okay, if you're not ready to accept this, we see how Narad Muni dealt with Dhruva Maharaj. Narad Muni told Dhruva that, you're a child. Why do you, if you're an adult, you're mature, evolved people don't take insults so seriously. And he says, if you're a child, then children, they don't take insults so seriously. If two children fight and they say, Katti, I will never talk with you. And couple of days later they say, oh, this is my best friend forever. So he says that, why do you don't take this so seriously? Either way, he tries to actually checkmate Dhruva. And what does Dhruva say? He says, your words are true, but they are not applicable for me. They're not applicable for me. And now when you could say that these words were rebellious, Narad Muni gave an instruction, Dhruva rejected it. But Narad Muni was mature enough to understand Dhruva's situation. And so the dynamic that Narad Muni exhibits is, Narad Muni with Dhruva Maharaj, what he does is, not so much instruction, but negotiation. Not instruction, but negotiation. Okay, if this is not possible for you, then is this possible? Is this possible? So in some ways, instruction may not work, but that does not have to lead to a breakdown of the relationship. We can negotiate. And then when this Narad Muni gives that example that, okay, if this level is not possible for you, is this level possible? Is this level possible? And then that way we can have a relationship which by which we can actually help our children even through their turbulent years in a way that they also value that help, not that they see it as an intrusion. And the maturity to be able to negotiate can come from our Krishna consciousness. If we actually gain security through our Krishna consciousness and we become strengthened in our understanding of what we are meant to do as servants of Krishna in our role as parents. So I'll summarize what I spoke today. Broadly, I started with three main points. We discussed about human nature, and then we talked about is the nature changeable, and then we talked about how parents can play a role in changing nature. So what is nature? The two theories that people are basically bad or people are basically good. The rightist and the Christian, the communist idea. So Gita's understanding is that both are true because there are two levels of innateness. The level of soul, everyone is good. At the level of the mind, depends on the impression that are there. So is nature changeable? Yes, it is. Dharma is both at the individual and social level. Then we talked about the vrittis need to be channeled. That is not to be changed, but to be channeled and developed. The vasanas need to be disciplined. And the Eastern model of parenting, which focuses on more on controlling, it's like the parents, children like clay, that is good for curbing the vasanas, but that can crush the vritti also. The Western model of parenting, where children are just given autonomy, you do what you want. That may be good for developing the vritti, but that can also let the vasanas go unshackled, and that can be destructive. So the balance is that, especially in childhood, a child needs to learn boundaries, and that's why the parents need to be able to say no to their children, and that's what may help them to develop their individuality. Then we talked about how, as a child, the child is growing. Initially, they're influenced a lot by the parents, then by their community, and then by the larger society and the culture within that society. So, when we are practicing spirituality, we want to focus on helping our children to develop their relationship with Krishna. But if you put too much pressure on that, then our relationship with our children may also get weakened. That's why there has to be a proper balance of our contribution and our expectation. The key thing we can do for our children is give them happy memories. And that's what, if you give them in their childhood, and when they go to the teenage years, then they will go through a phase of rebellion. But that rebellion is not that they are going against us, as they are trying to discover their own identity. They are too small to have made their own identity, but too old to accept their identity solely as their parents' children. So at that phase, they will try to find their identity among their peers. And then if we have given them not a black and white, but a nuanced understanding, then they will seek acceptance among a peer circle that is sattvic or at least rajasic and not tamasic. So instead of seeing simply as devotees and non-devotees, we see that sattva, rajas, tamas is pro-devotional, non-devotional, anti-devotional, and we can help them to seek acceptance in a social circle that is healthy. So in sattva, the vritti is well developed, the vasana is reasonably curved. In rajas, the vasana is what powers the vritti, and then in tamas, the vasana becomes so strong that the vritti is crushed because of that. So then we talked about in parenting, when especially in the teenage phase, there, and we may either, if we are in rajas, we may think that I have to get my children to obey me. We overestimate our capacity. In tamas, we start thinking children don't even listen to me, so why try also? So both of these are unhealthy. We need to realistically estimate our capacity, and that means that is where Krishna consciousness can help us in two ways. One is that Krishna consciousness talk about service attitude. Service attitude means we accept limitations and we function diligently within those limitations. So this is the level of control I have over my children right now. Then let me act within that fully. And Krishna consciousness talk about detachment. That doesn't mean we don't care for our children. It's not hard-hearted as a responsibility. It is the willingness to let go of our control, of our previous level of control, and still function responsibly. And Narada Muni demonstrates how we could deal with children, not just in a mode of instruction, but in terms of negotiation by which we come to a mutually acceptable level of functioning. And this is how we don't change our children's nature in the sense of changing their vrittis, but we change it in terms of helping them to discipline their vasanas, by which they, as their God-given, they as children, with their nature from their past lives, they can develop into fully functional human beings and good devotees. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So, are there any questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the class. I especially like the point around ensuring that we understand what level of control we can have. So you also mentioned the two different types of parenting styles, right? Eastern and Western. So as a parent, how key strategies to use to change your parenting style? Because we all have our innate nature and how we've been brought up and also influence the way we parent. How do we change, or is there any key strategies to change our parenting styles? Or is it just understanding the situation and going with that?
So, can we change our parenting style? Well, even we also have our nature, and in our nature we have our vritti and our vasana. So, we can't change our vritti. And each of us is of particular nature. But even we may get short tempered, we may feel very insecure as parents, we may feel too much anxiety, too much. We may also have our emotions which may get the better of us. So if we can get a better handle on these negative emotions, on these harmful emotions, we can say, then our particular vritti, our particular nature as parents will manifest. And we may not be able to change that much, but the rough edges around it will be smoothed. So that way we'll be able to be more effective as parents. So I would say the same principle would apply with others. Say if you are trying to share Krishna Bhakti with a new audience, a new demographic, we don't know much about them. Say we are habituated with sharing Krishna Bhakti with Indians, but if you have to start sharing it with, say, Africans or South Americans or whatever, then we'll try to understand them a little bit, learn a little bit more about them, understand them, and then we'll be able to share with them better. So it's like that. It's not so much changing our nature as increasing our understanding of whom we are interacting with. When we do that, then within our nature itself, we'll find within the limitations of our nature, we'll find the best way that we can connect with that particular audience. In this, that applies even to our children. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you for the message. Prabhuji, so earlier we also mentioned about Krishna has planned for everyone. Like we all are born with our own baggage. Like so, our kids are born with their own baggage. So when their destiny is fixed, how much of an influence as a parent we have? So it's like they are born with their baggage and they have their destiny set. Like what kind of influence as parents we would have on their destiny?
Okay. So if children have their own baggage and they have their destiny, Krishna has their plan for them. His plan for them. So what can we do as parents? Well, I'll have to give another class for this. Okay, I'll try to explain briefly. Two main points. See, first is when we say Krishna has a plan for everyone, Krishna's plan is not necessarily fixed. See, Krishna is a person and he wants personal reciprocation with us, with each one of us. So it is not that, say, if I as a soul am here and say Krishna is here, it is not that Krishna has a plan, only by this path I'll go to Krishna. If I take any other path, I'm going away from Krishna. It's not necessarily like that. It is just there is one path in terms of raising our consciousness. But individually on this path, we can say there are multiple lanes. Somebody can take this lane, somebody can take this lane. Each individual can serve Krishna in different ways. There are multiple lanes on the path to Krishna. So we can say Krishna's plan is more in terms of a general direction for us. So even as parents, now we want our children to obey us. But when children sometimes don't listen to us, children cause headaches or heartaches. Now, would we want to replace our child with a perfectly obedient robot? No parent would want that. Then if we as parents don't want simply obedient robots, would Krishna want that? No. So Krishna's plan, first of all, is not like a one fixed path, and if you don't choose that, then you are lost forever. It's a general direction. And if you go a little bit off track, Krishna's plan is malleable enough to accommodate those off steps and still take us in the right direction. That's first thing. And second thing is with respect to destiny. Again, destiny is not entirely fixed. Destiny broadly means certain amount of good things we have done in the past, and amount of bad things in the past. Those will have certain results in our life. So certain adversities we face, certain lucky breaks we may get. Those we can say are destined. But apart from that, there is a lot that is very much within the jurisdiction of our choice and in the jurisdiction of the, say, with respect to our children, their choice and the training that they get by which they can choose wisely. So even if they get a lucky break, because that's what they're destined to get, but if they have not really been able to discipline their vasanas, their vritti is not well developed, then they will not be able to use the lucky break. They face an adversity also. If they have learned to to discipline their vasana, they will not get angry, they will not get depressed, they will not become violent. They'll face the adversity more gracefully. So definitely our guidance, our help can play a significant role within the broad parameters of Krishna's plan, within the broad limitations of broad contours created by destiny. Within that, our actions can make a significant difference. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your lecture. It's so useful for current thing. So my question is, so we are gaining this all knowledge through lectures, but in the provoking situation, we are not able to apply this knowledge. So when a child is not listening to us, we are just blasting by blaming on them, scolding them. So situation is going so bad. So how can we control and apply at that point provoking situations come? So how can we apply that knowledge? The urge to scold children, it won't stop and it won't give the space to think and
That's true.
yeah. So how can we do the best?
So if we get provoked, then we tend to forget everything that we have learned. So what do we do? Well, that's a universal challenge, and sometimes we sometimes forget that we all are, yes, we are all trying to be spiritual, but we are still human beings. As human beings, we have our fallibilities. So my understanding is it's a incremental process. So if we consider, I do a course on journaling for self-transformation. So we talk about there are different stages. There is, we do wrong and justify. That's the lowest level. Like I was at one place, and there the temple leader used to get very angry, just lash out at everyone, and all the devotees were very scared, very hurt. And I told them, that Prabhu, I had a good relationship with the temple leaders. I said, Prabhu, when you get angry, people get hurt by that. He says, yes, I know that. He says, if people just started doing what I was telling them to do, I would never have to get angry. So there's no awareness in oneself. So at basic level, we do wrong and then we justify it. We don't think I did anything wrong. I think others are wrong. That's why they did it. That's why I did the thing. So there is but this next level is we do wrong and we recognize it, and then we try to make up for it. We recognize and then we amend it, whatever we can. Then after some time, what will happen is we do wrong, recognize while doing it. That means I start getting angry, I start lashing out, and at that time only I realize, oh, I'm lashing out right now. Yeah, so we may still get angry, but maybe our anger will not go to the extent that it will go earlier. Then after that, we may still do wrong, but it may be only mental. That means we realize that I'm going to get angry right now, I'm going to lash out. So we try to avoid that situation. We try to deal with the situation gracefully. That problem may have to be solved, but I realize I'm not in a state at which I can deal with this right now in a mature way. So we recognize that, and then we we avoid that situation. Then at the top will be we don't do wrong. So this is not a 1-0 journey. It can take some time. So even if we are moving one step ahead, that is also good. So if we do this way, most of us, we generally oscillate between these 3 stages. Sometimes we recognize I'm about to do wrong and we stop ourselves. Sometimes we start doing it, we do something and then, hey, we should not do it. We pull ourselves back and something. Sometimes we do it and then we say, anyway, it's like we decide to say, we get angry and then we think, now I have got angry, let me lash out completely. So sometimes it becomes like that. But even if you're taking one step forward, it is a good journey. So that's why we need to have these, again, shades of gray in between black and white. When I get provoked, I can't control myself or I can control myself. It's not that simple. Okay, we'll all get provoked, but within that, am I moving towards the lower side or the upper side? I'm overall moving to the upper side, where on getting provoked, I don't overreact or have a knee-jerk reaction which is very extreme. That is also progress. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So don't do wrong. Top one.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I think this is important again. Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, how can we understand, like, as a parent, in some point in time we are also kids, children for the parent, and while growing up, we had an experiences, and we experienced good and bad and everything, and we know something which is bad, we already experienced that bad thing, and explaining the same thing to the kids and not to go into that again, they also need to experience the same thing. But if they are not taking into that right way of the experience of the parents, how can we understand that? How we can?
Yeah, actually, this is
Another class.
yeah. Sometimes we may have gone through our own experiences, which have taught us certain things. But when we try to tell that to our children, they just don't accept it. So what do we do? See, what happens is sometimes our cultural, let's put it this way, let's say as human beings, we are all human beings, whether it is thousands of years ago or now. This is say our grandparents, our parent generation. In the middle is our generation, then our children generation. So parents, let's put it this way. Anyway, so what happens is that the principle that we are all human beings are the same, but the cultural context changes substantially. So let's take it from a simpler example. Say, let's not a cultural context, let's take, say, financial context. Maybe we grew up with our parents, they earn maybe 10,000 rupees, and then we learn to save every penny. But now maybe we are earning 100,000 rupees, and then our kids have grown with a particular level of comfort and luxury. And then we talk from our reference point, okay, I only had this and I only had that. And then that just doesn't make sense to them. Because they may say, you are taking things for granted. Well, maybe they are, but that everybody has a reference point from which they look at the world. And we can't change that reference point. So we need to understand that. Now, it's not that two reference points means completely different visions. There can be similarities in the visions, but we need to recognize that reference points are different. And when the reference points are different, certain perspectives do become different from the reference point. So that's why sometimes our experiences can help others. But if the focus on the experiences is too much on the cultural context, like say in general, traditional cultures, this is again a major difference between, say, East and the West. See, if this is parent, this is child. In the West, in the East, the relationship is very hierarchical. In the West, it is very horizontal. That means in India, probably I could never call my father by his name. Isn't it? But that's what kids do. Is it? they make use the word dad, or just call the dad by the name. Yeah, so the culture is more horizontal, and this is something which is we really can't change that too much. So now, does that mean that children don't need guidance of their parents? Children can't take the guidance of the parents? They can, but the framing has to be slightly different. So framing means that if we make it, maybe in our childhood, we just given instruction, or it's coming from parents, I'll obey it. But in today's world, it just doesn't work. So because their cultural context is different. So what we need to do more is that rather than focusing on the cultural context, we focus more on the human experience. The human experience is very similar. Say, for example, if you consider Ramayana today. Now, we may say, why did Ram have to leave his kingdom just because his father had given a word to Kaikai? And if he had got a kingdom, why did Bharat have to give the kingdom, offer the kingdom all to Ram again? If today, if one brother gave his paduka to the other brother will take the paduka and beat him on the head. So, maybe those exact actions are not replicable today, but the broad principle of selflessness, of valuing our relationships above our possessions, those principles are still applicable today. So sometimes if we focus too much on the specifics, then it highlights the cultural gap too much, and then it doesn't make any sense. But we focus more on the principles. Now, exactly how to differentiate between that again requires understanding, which is the cultural context they are coming from. But these two things, the specifics may vary, but the principles are universal. And we need to, if we communicate the principles without emphasizing too much on the specifics, not emphasizing the specific doesn't mean that we don't tell our experience, but we tell our experience not in a way that we expect them to behave in the same way that we behaved in that situation, but rather the underlying principle they apply according to their cultural context. Then that is very helpful. Then they can actually connect. So another aspect of that is that there is the aspect of vulnerability. See, in the hierarchical culture, the idea is that the person authority very rarely shows vulnerability to the subordinate. That is, I'm good, I know things, and I'll solve your problems, don't worry. But in the horizontal kind of culture, if somebody acts like I know it all, people just, people don't trust such a person. But you exhibit vulnerability. I also face similar problems, and at that time I didn't know what to do. And then this is what I tried, this is how I tried it. Then it helped. Many devotees, when we read Prabhupada's books, sometimes they can seem to be very instructive. Do this, don't do this. Prabhupada is very direct. But when we read Prabhupada Leelamrit, and then we see what all challenges Prabhupada went through, then although Prabhupada is a pure devotee, is much more than a human being. But when we see the human side of Prabhupada, how he was all alone, he didn't know whether to go left or right. When he landed in America, how he was attacked by David and he had to flee from there, and he had to start everything from scratch. And seeing that human side actually helps us to connect more with them. So we may sometimes need to be vulnerable. Not that I have answers to all the questions, but we are all dealing with this problem, and let's try to work together to solve the problem. So showing vulnerability is sometimes a strength, especially in horizontal relationships. Does it answer your question, Samir? Thank you. So let me know when you should stop. Yes, Mataji.
You said that we must accept our limitations and then work according to those. My question is probably, how do we remain motivated to work within those limitations when there is lack of contribution or reciprocity?
So how can we work within limitations when there is lack of reciprocation? Are you talking specifically about parent-child relationship or any relationship? Yes, sometimes.
What are the ways to act within those limitations?
Sometimes different relationships work best at different distances. During this pandemic, I started doing this monks podcast where I would invite senior devotees and we would have various discussions. So several several of my audience, they said, you can sometimes invite 2 devotees and you can have a 3-way discussion. So once or twice I have had that. But sometimes it happens that when I suggest 2 senior devotees, they can join. So one devotee told me about the other devotee, we're great friends as long as we meet once a year. Now, that doesn't apply to most relationships. But sometimes 2 people are very different and they can respect each other, but they both need their space. So if we are finding that in the particular relationship you're not getting much reciprocation, then maybe that relationship will work better at a greater distance. So that does not mean that relationship has to be broken down. It doesn't have discontinued. It is just that people are different. And just because we can't have a relationship with a particular level of intimacy does not mean we can't have that relationship at all. It is that willingness to adjust. That okay, this person is comfortable with this level of relationship. Now, in different cultures, when 2 people talk with each other, there are different levels of distance. In some cultures, 2 people come very close to each other. In some cultures, people stand at a significant distance. Now, if 2 people are from 2 different cultures, what happens is the 2 people are talking. The first person is coming closer and closer to the second person, and the first person moving, second person moving further and further away. So if they have to have a reasonable discussion, they both have to mutually agree. Let's have this distance and we can talk with each other. So like that we have to work it out.
So we'll take one last question.
Yes.
Could you explain a little more about where the conditioning comes from, specifically the vritti and vasana? I don't know if you may have already explained it, but the exact origin of it.
Where does the vritti and vasana come from? It comes from our past actions. In general, every action that we do, it has a result. It has an outer result and an inner result. Say if I do an action, the outer result is what is seen in the world. Say for example, somebody smokes for the first time. Then maybe they cough. It's not a very comfortable thing to smoke for the first time. Now that is the outer result. There is an inner result. The inner result is that impression is created in the mind. And then, so this is like an inner result is an impression is formed. Now, once the impression is formed, from this impression, a proposition comes. Let's smoke again. And then, when again there is the outer action is there. The person deliberates on should I do it or should I not do it? Then they do it. Then again an impression is formed. But this time, it is a double impression. The previous action, this action, the impression becomes deeper. And in that way, the impressions become stronger and stronger. So now this can apply both to vasanas and vrittis. If I yell at a person and I get away with that yelling, then what will happen? Next time I get angry, I'll yell more to the person. So that impression is formed, then it goes further and further. Similarly, if somebody is practicing music and they practice it and they learn it, they become good at it, they like it, and that also creates an impression. And they'll continue that. See, sometimes there are these kids who are prodigies. There are some kids who are just still wearing their diapers and they are playing musical instruments. Then there are parents who change diapers and they can't play the musical instrument. So, how did that happen? Those kids have actually practiced that in their previous life. Now, it's not that when they are born they start playing music, but when they get that opportunity, that what impressions are there in the past, they start manifesting. So our past actions create those impressions. Okay. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Preman. Hari Hari.
HG Chaitanya Charan prabhuji ki
Jai. Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. That was a very wonderful lecture, Prabhuji. Thank you very much. And there are many more lectures to come, wonderful lectures to come on Friday. So today is Wednesday. So Friday we have another session, Friday and Saturday. It's a 2-day seminar. So Friday at 6:30 in the Lower Hut Hall. And then on Saturday in the Lower Hut Hall at 5 o'clock. So there will be a 2-day seminar like that. And then on Sunday at 8 o'clock in the morning, we have another lecture. So there are 3 more lectures to come from Prabhuji. Also, if there are any books that you want to purchase, then you can purchase. Prabhuji will just explain about one set.
So, as I mentioned, I had written about 27 books. In the pandemic, I wrote these 4 books. So, all of them are studying the Bhagavad Gita from different perspectives. Srila Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is, and he said that study scripture scrutinizingly from different perspectives. So, this is 365 reflections for daily mindfulness. This is one article on one page, and there's one verse mentioned below, based on which the article is, and then there are reflection questions. So this talks about how to deal with adversities, or how to resist temptation, how to be less judgmental, how to be more sensitive in our speech, how to be less ritualistic and more spiritual in our activities. And so like that there are various sections. Each of them have 50-60 articles, total 365 articles, and the table of contents itself is around 20 pages. So you can just glance through it. Whichever article, whichever title intrigues you, you can read that. So this is very accessible way to see the practical applicability of the Bhagavad Gita's wisdom in our life. And then these 2 are more for, if you want to understand the Gita deeper, these are a part of the Gita study series. This is Relishing Bhagavad Gita. This follows the mood of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary of the Bhagavad Gita and shows that the Gita is not just philosophy, but it is actually Krishna's love for Arjuna and ultimately divinity's love for humanity expressed through philosophy. So when Krishna says Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam to Arjuna, now what does this mean for Arjuna on the battlefield? Is he going to offer a tulsi leaf to Krishna? What does it mean? So the Gita's verses seen in the light of the Krishna-Arjuna relationship are very fascinating. A fascinating way to understand the Gita. There are many correlations with the Gita and Mahabharata incidents. And if you want to see how Krishna is a loving divinity, Krishna's love is seen through the Gita, and our bhakti can be nourished by this approach to study the Gita, relation Bhagavad Gita. And this is Bhagavad Gita Insights. This follows the other prominent commentator in our tradition, Baldev Vidyabhushan, his mood that this is a rational approach to the Gita. That some of the questions we discussed, is everything destined? If God controls everything, then do we really have free will? If the modes do everything, then can we do anything at all? Then if modes control everything, then why are we held responsible for our karma? So questions like these which may arise when we read the verses of the Gita, they are answered over here. So both these books have 100 articles and many of the diagrams that I was drawing in the class today. So there are about 80 diagrams like this explaining the concept, so that makes it easier to understand. And this is an inspirational approach to the Gita, where there are 365 quotes inspired by the Gita. So for example, we fall to temptation not because we are powerless, but because we are purposeless. So vasanas are there in everyone, but it is when a person does not have a purpose, I mean the buddhi is not trying to develop, then there is nothing except the vasana, the person will succumb to it. So each of these is a self-explanatory quote in itself. But if you Google it, it will take you to my website gitadaily.com, where you have an article as well as the article explaining the quote as well as the Gita verse on which it is based. But even without that, each quote is self-explanatory. Humility means to focus on how we can serve, not on what we deserve. So now, this is also a very non-intrusive way of sharing spiritual wisdom with your colleagues, relatives and others. Just keep this on your desk and they see a quote, and if it intrigues them, then you can start a discussion with it and bring some spirituality. So each of these is available, these are 15 and this is 25. But if you take it together, it's a set at 60, and I can sign the books also if you want. And apart from that, as geetadaily.com, there's a lot of articles available if you would like to subscribe and read over there also. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So please contact Kirtiwanta Prabhuji if you want to purchase the books individually or as set, or you want to buy multiple sets. We have enough sets available, but you never know. Last time when Prabhuji came, he had multiple boxes full of books and they were just gone, and on the last day we did not have anything remaining. So please don't keep your desire to purchase till the last day, Sunday, when Prabhuji is doing the last program. If you are keen, either take it today or tomorrow. Like that you can reserve those books. Thank you very much.